Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH2503, and this is the overview video summary for the 15th lecture, which is entitled Community Media Literacies. And what I want to cover in this lecture is the idea of kind of skills, knowledge, awareness development that is encapsulated by community media, and what it means, if you like, as a kind of one strand of the process of what community media does, which is to help develop and cultivate a sense of civic participation and engagement, social and civic participation and engagement. But we have to ask the question, how and in what way? And do people have the capability and the skills and the thinking skills and the practical skills and the access to resources to be able to engage? And I suppose one of the the principles that we work with community media is about lowering barriers to entry, so making things as simple as possible for people to engage with. Some people are highly trained, highly technical, other people are less so. But how do we embrace everybody and allow them to articulate their voices in the most simple possible way without putting professionalised or corporate barriers in place to actively stop people from participating and sharing their point of view? So we have to ask a couple of questions about what we mean by empowerment. So, if we're addressing issues of marginalisation and voice poverty, what is it that we're talking about in terms of media empowerment? How is this integral to the development of community media projects? And what are the kind of standard approaches to media literacy that have been embraced and discussed in the last couple of decades with the rise of digital and electronic communication forms, which give us a more dispersed and decentered set of platforms and networks in order to be able to be active media producers. So we'll go through some ideas about what it means to be for online literacies, and we'll look at the idea it's about a kind of sense of control and understanding, but where the boundaries that previously marked things very clearly are now less easy to understand, and that there's been a diffusion between different modes of media. Previously media was held particularly each one was kind of independently understood as radio, television, newspapers, film, cinema, that kind of thing. Games were all held separately. Now it's very difficult to see the difference and articulate the difference in practice. So the boundaries have become more open and potentially more democratic in the kind of utopian view of this. But there's a kind of frustration, if you like, that what we is community media winning the argument? This is a good question to ask about the social value that it has. And let's keep going back to this phrase that it's not what you produce in community media that matters, it's what you become in producing it. And that implies a shift in people's thinking and understanding about why community media is important. And I think one of the things we've got to try and figure out is a way to keep kind of pushing that argument and demonstrating how it works in practice, so that we can show to people who set policy and who fund organisations and who set the regulatory framework and the balance between commercial and private and community-based enterprises and opportunities is it's important that we're engaged in that discussion. So I've kind of framed this into kind of three or four modes, really. Three modes. One is to think about media literacies as, if you like, almost a kind of, I've called it a kind of theological approach. It's kind of like an extrinsic approach, an externalized approach. So what you do is you think about your skills and needs of understanding literacy as a way which is focused on concepts, philosophies, ideologies, those kind of things. So there are kind of external concepts. But then the other side of that is a kind of focus on smarts, skills, what it is that we need to do, what it is that we need to be capable of. And then there's a third strand, which is that sense of personal transformation. So a critical sense of engagement with media. So we kind of are thinking what and how we understand literacies in the context of these groups of ideas, groups of concepts that are kind of vague and out there, and which we use as a kind of rule of thumb to understand how things work. Then we've got the kind of very much kind of practice-based focus on media skills, which is the kind of media skills which are competence-based affordances, what's involved in the technology, what changes, what does it enable us to do. And then we've got this third component, which is about transformation and about empowerment and enablement and entitlement to play a role and a part in a civic discourse. So you kind of got this triad of different ideas, and it's about taking us beyond a kind of simple sense of transaction. So I went to the Apple shop yesterday. I had to go to the Apple shop to put something in for repair. Lots of people buying very expensive equipment and media devices, and Apple makes an awful lot of money out of these things, selling the dream that being a producer and a media content producer is easy. But at Apple's prices, you walk away having spent the best part of £2,000, not even taking into account software, that kind of thing. Do we need to be spending money in that kind of a way? Do we need to be, and is it as easy as just buying something in the shop, or is there another approach that needs to be understood and discussed about what it means to be an active producer and contributor to a media culture? So we'll look at some of the traditional the models that underpin how we think about media, and have perhaps informed why and how you've come to university yourself. So we'll look at kind of media skills models. We'll look at the kind of idea, the general idea about media communication, which is encoding and decoding, the transmission model of information. And we looked last week at the banking and the teaching model. So we'll revisit them because what we want to think about is what transforms these more traditional approaches. And there's a concept of thinking about communities of practice, the kind of elements of learning which are collaborative, which we bring together within, between ourselves, and we contribute and we become greater than the sum of our parts. So a kind of collective intelligence or crowdsourcing approach. So there's a challenge to our assumptions in adopting a digitally informed, participatively informed set of media literacies. And that means that we have to embrace a kind of participation. But on what basis does that participation take place? And can we rely, if you like, on ready-made packages in order to be able to deal and deliver the answers? So when we doubt, there's a common response now, well, there's an app for that. We just download an app. There's something that's done the work for us already. Or do we need to step back from that and refigure how we do things from scratch ourselves? So this is about valuing grassroots, what people can do for themselves. So this is a politicised form of engagement, small p politics, big P politics. And it's about what Paulo Freire says. It's the idea of changing from a problem setting to a problem solving approach, whereby what we're actually learning is problem solving skills and critical thinking skills. And so it's about, if you like, thinking with a purpose and adopting a kind of disposition which says, we don't take this at face value. There's something else going on here and we need to understand it. We can take it apart and we can put it back together again and use it for our own purposes, not just the purposes that it's been supposedly identified for us. So we'll look at the idea of what good critical thinking is, and we'll think about how this fits in with the kind of the development of community media projects and how learning and literacy skills development are an integral part of projects, and they're what primarily drive the success of community media projects. Right, okay, I've gone on a little bit longer than I expected to. The notes are available on the DMU Commons wiki. If you just go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk, they're up online. If you want to discuss any of the topics, or if you want to add your own topics, we have the DMU Commons discussion platform, which is talk.our.dmu.ac.uk. Just log in with your P number, follow the instructions on the front, and hopefully we'll see some content being shared on there by lots of students in the run up to the Easter. Okay, I'll see you at the lecture.